Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the Attainable Housing Virtual Listening Session. I'm your host, Jordan Lindsay. We are grateful for your participation and look forward to hearing your questions and comments. Just a few ground rules when we get to the Q&A portion after the remarks. You can raise your hand with the Zoom feature located at the bottom of the menu panel, and I will call on participants in the order that their hands are raised. Now, in order to hear from as many people as possible today, we do ask that you try to keep your questions and comments to about 45 seconds. We also have Spanish interpretation services available if needed. My colleague, Marcela Rodriguez, will now explain. Marcela, to you.
Thank you. Gracias, Jordan. Buenas tardes a todos y muchísimas gracias por participar en esta sesión sobre viviendas asequibles en el condado. Contamos con interpretación simultánea al español. Si desea escuchar la sesión en nuestro idioma, por favor diríjase a la parte inferior de nuestra pantalla de Zoom y hágale clic a la sección de interpretación donde encontrará la opción de audio en español. Muchísimas gracias. Jordan, back to you.
Thank you so much, Marcela. Now I'll toss it to Council President Andrew Friedson to begin this virtual event. Council President, to you.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, everybody, for being here today to discuss this important topic. I'm Andrew Friedson. I represent District 1 on the County Council. I serve as the chair of the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee, and I'm currently serving a one-year term as the council president. Tonight, or excuse me, this afternoon, we're here to receive an overview of the Planning Board's recommendations. Director Sartori will share a brief PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll open up the floor to questions and comments. A lot of people have asked about the process, specifically what the process at the council will be now that we've received these recommendations from the Planning Board. These recommendations were transmitted to the council this past spring after working on attainable housing strategies for a few years. The Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee held 3 briefings over the summer on the recommendations, and the goal was for the council and residents to have time to learn about them and to not rush the process. Those 3 briefings are available online and are streamed on the council's website. To be clear, there's currently no legislation that is before us. These listening sessions are not public hearings as part of the legislative process. It's a time for us to hear from you and to make sure that we are engaging with residents even prior to any legislation being introduced. Our council's analysts have been present in all the listening sessions that have been throughout the county and are documenting the comments and the questions that residents have. After today's session, council staff will gather the feedback from all of the sessions as well as the feedback sent via the web portal that's been set up, and it will be shared with all council members, including the several council members who are here this evening and most council members who have attended different sessions throughout the county. Housing has been a high priority for me during my time at the council, and we've made significant strides in the affordable housing arena, developing new and innovative tools to help increase our housing stock, whether through new construction or preserving naturally occurring affordable units. We've utilized the master planning process, and we've also utilized new tools at our disposal. The Planning Board has now recommended this additional tool in an ambitious set of recommendations intended to create more housing at different price points. I want to reiterate that we have before us a set of recommendations, not legislation. There's been a lot of misinformation that's been put out there, and I want to address some of it while you're here today. Some have made claims that the council is rushing something through that could not be further from the truth. If we were rushing, we would have drafted legislation and introduced it already. We took this summer to have these briefings that I mentioned earlier at the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee. Now we're taking the time to have these listening sessions. And I just want to make sure that that is very clear that there is no legislation before us today. There was reports that there would be a vote that would take place in October. That is not accurate and not true. It wouldn't even be possible for us to take votes in October since nothing has been introduced at this time. When something is introduced, if something is introduced, there is a 30-day period at minimum before public hearings would take place, and then it would go through the entire legislative process, including committee work sessions and council work sessions, all of which are streamed live. I hope this afternoon we can agree to have a thoughtful and respectful discussion. Would appreciate everybody's commitment to that. And in order to leave as much time as possible for your feedback, I'll now turn the mic over to the council's at-large members at the in-person listening sessions. Many of the district council members joined and said a few words. For this listening session, which is countywide, you'll hear from your 4 at-large council members. With that, let me turn it over first to Councilmember Glass.
Well, thank you very much, Council President Friedson. I appreciate you having these conversations all across the county and virtually. My staff and I have attended all of the meetings, and we have been listening to residents about how best to create and provide more housing for our kids and our grandkids. And so I appreciate the respectful way in which all residents have been engaging in this conversation. I look forward to the questions and comments that come out of this virtual session today. And really just want to say I appreciate the civility that Montgomery County residents are providing and the way that we engage in this incredibly important conversation. And for those of you who are Jewish, I just want to say Shana Tova and look forward to a sweet and happy new year. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember Glass. Let me turn it over to Councilmember Juanda, who also serves on the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee with me and Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President. The opportunity to be here and share brief remarks. Thank you for everyone for joining today, virtually and in person. My staff and I have been at all of the sessions as well, and I appreciate all the community engagement. As hopefully you know, I'm deeply committed to advancing multiple strategies for more housing opportunities, particularly affordable housing, renter protections, and rent stabilization. I'm proud of the work that we've done on the council to this point, but we also need to explore other opportunities for innovative solutions like social housing and modular housing. I often talk about the 3 Ps, and my colleagues know this, particularly on the Planning, Housing, Parks Committee: protecting our current residents from displacement, preserving existing affordable housing, and producing more housing types and options at different prices to meet the needs of our community. I know everyone on this call knows I'm concerned, can my kids live here when they get older? My oldest being 13 now. I'm also deeply committed to hearing the views of our residents. In this process over the last several weeks, in several years really, we've received hundreds, if not thousands of messages, very heartfelt messages from residents concerned about these proposals from the Planning Board. I really appreciate the Council President laying out that there is nothing introduced and there's nothing before us. This is part of the process to gain information from the community and diverse perspectives, and then see if and how and when we move forward with anything. If I had more time, I'd share that I understand some of the concerns about character of neighborhood, infrastructure, many of the things that are heard. I'm sure some of the things we'll hear today and some maybe I haven't heard. I appreciate the in-depth and well-researched concerns folks have sent in to my office, and I'm sure to my colleagues' offices. For me, the most critical thing out of this whole thing as we move forward is that the public sector, we must be on the same page about achieving affordable housing for our residents. And building market rate housing alone won't get it done. This proposal in any form won't be the whole solution. So we want to hear from you and make sure we have full, complete solutions. So thank you. You've been heard, you will be heard today, and this is the beginning, not and nowhere near the end of the process. So thank you very much and look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, Councilmember Juanda. Let me turn it to Councilmember Albornoz.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. As Councilmember Juanda just mentioned, we have heard there are hundreds of you on this Zoom. There have been thousands of you that have participated in these listening sessions and tens of thousands of residents that have weighed in on this critically important issue. And I know all of my colleagues and I agree that that is not a good thing. That is a great thing, because we are stronger as a community when we hear your voices and we collaborate and have meaningful dialogue, such as we're going to have this afternoon, on tackling what I think most reasonable people can agree is a challenging issue. We have a riddle that we're trying to solve here in Montgomery County. We do have a housing challenge. It comes down to a supply and demand issue. There are many more people that want to live here and stay here than there are opportunities for them to do so. But we also have to balance that with wanting to make sure that we don't impact the very quality of life that people signed up to live here for and want to continue to come here for in the first place. There has to be a balance, and we can't create more problems than we're trying to solve through legislation that we are considering. I appreciate that we are taking a slow and methodical approach to this very important piece of legislation that, as the council president mentioned, has not been introduced, and there's still much that needs to be done before it is introduced. And even if and when something is introduced, I believe we will need an especially long runway to have a meaningful and thoughtful conversation. So I want to thank everybody on this call for being here, the planning staff. I look forward to actively engaging in this conversation and discussion. And I do believe that in this case, slow and steady is going to win the race. Thank you very much. I turn it back to you, Mr. Council President.
Thank you, Councilmember Albornoz. Let me turn it finally to Councilmember Sales.
And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, President Friedson and Director Sartori, for your ongoing efforts to keep the community central to these deliberations that we are having. I also want to start by thanking everyone who has taken the time to attend today's session and all of the previous in-person sessions. My staff has been present at each of the previous listening sessions, and they are also present on this recording today with any questions or additional concerns that may be communicated to better inform any decisions that we make as a council. And as the president stated in his remarks, these deliberations don't happen behind closed doors. They are all recorded. And we welcome your input even after today. So I'm glad to see so many people with us. I do want to be brief so that we can get to the discussion, but we know that we are in the midst of a housing crisis. Governor Moore passed a housing bill just this most recent session. Since I've been on the council, I've been working with my colleagues to pass legislation to increase the amount of affordable housing that we can add to the supply of housing. We've passed legislation to help our nonprofits, like our faith communities, also contribute to our low housing supply. And so I'm glad that we are looking at all sorts of recommendations to ensure access and affordability are central to any solutions that we propose. But as Councilmember Friedson mentioned, these are only non-binding recommendations from the Planning Board. The council has not yet considered any legislation, and I have not taken any position on any of these proposals. That's why your input in previous sessions and today's sessions are so invaluable. And so there is no immediate pressure for a decision. And again, I want to thank everyone for being here today. And please don't hesitate to reach out to our office should you have any remaining questions or concerns following this listening session. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield.
Thank you, Councilmember Sales. Thank you to the at-large council members for joining. I also want to acknowledge Council Vice President Kate Stewart is on the call. Councilmember Natalie Fana Gonzalez, who represents District 6 and is a member of the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee as well. And we also have Chris Wilhelm on behalf of Councilmember Kristen Mink, Wafa Jawad on behalf of Councilmember Marilyn Balcom, Lori Edberg on behalf of Councilmember Sidney Katz. And I just want to acknowledge and appreciate so many local elected officials from municipalities across Montgomery County who've joined us, homeowners association and civic organization leaders who are here today. There's too many to name, but we appreciate you joining us and being here today and for your ongoing engagement on this issue and on these issues moving forward. With that, let me turn it over to Chair of the Planning Board, Artie Harris, and to Planning Director Jason Sartori. They will briefly walk through what we're here today to talk about with the recommendations that they have sent to the council, and then we'll get to the questions and comments, which is the real reason why we're here.
Yeah, thank you, Council President Friedson, and good afternoon. I'm Artie Harris, Chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board, and I'm happy to be here today to highlight the importance of this effort, which we've called Attainable Housing Strategies Initiative. The Planning Board and the Planning Department's efforts on attainable housing began in March 2021 when the Council sent us requests to consider and recommend, and I quote, zoning reforms that would allow greater opportunities for missing middle housing in Montgomery County, unquote. Missing middle refers to a range of building types that are compatible in scale, form, and construction with single-family homes, but include multiple housing units. The Council's request suggested that the board transmit its recommendations within 2 months. We began our effort, which became known as the Attainable Housing Strategies Initiative. The Planning Board identified 3 goals to guide our work. First, to increase opportunities to meet the county's diverse housing supply needs. Second, to unravel the exclusionary aspects of the county's single-family residential zones. And lastly, to create more opportunities for home ownership for more households and more parts of the county. The resulting recommended strategies reflect our approach to actualize these goals. This June, after more than 3 years of engagement, research, analysis, and policy debate, the board approved and transmitted to the County Council its Attainable Housing Strategies recommendations. This collection of recommended steps helps to achieve the vision established in our general plan, Thrive Montgomery 2050, for corridor-focused growth and increasing the diversity of housing options in the county. It will also help address the significant and growing housing shortage in our county. I'll now turn it over to our Planning Director, Jason Sartori, to go through the recommended strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Harris, and also thank you to President Friedson for helping us have all of these listening sessions over the last few weeks. I'm Jason Sartori. I'm the Director of the county's Planning Department, and I thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us here in this virtual listening session. As I begin, I want to talk through some of the data that underlie the recommendations that the Planning Board made. This first graph that you see shows the average size of a single-family detached home by decade built. You can see that those built in the 1950s average 1,567 square feet. The homes built in the in this most current decade average nearly 3,900 square feet. So you can see that homes have gotten larger and larger, and many of these larger homes that are being built today are tear down and rebuilt homes, which is when we have a smaller, relatively more affordable single family home that's torn down and replaced with a much larger, more expensive new home. This is mostly occurring inside the Beltway, but we do see the tear down rebuild phenomena happening all across the county, and that is contributing to a loss of affordability in our neighborhoods. One analysis we did on teardowns since 2011 showed that the average size of the original home was 1,500 square feet, and the average size of the replacement home was over 3,700 square feet. Even small, modest numbers of duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, and even small apartment buildings along our corridors could help combat this trend. Next slide. So we've heard a lot about the relative affordability of these potential new types of units. But here's one data point that shows the impact that size has on affordability. In 2023, the average detached home in Montgomery County was sold for $970,000, and that's compared to $440,000 for attached structures, condos, and co-ops. And townhouses. In 2024, year to date, the average detached home was sold for more than $1 million. That's across the entire county. Now, the graph on the screen will show the distribution of home sales in Montgomery County in 2023 by sales price and type of home. What you're seeing now in the blue bars are our single-family detached homes that were sold in 2023. And you can see they tend to be towards the high end of the spectrum here, with the largest groups being in the $600,000 to $800,000 range and the $1 million to $2.5 million range. Now, in green, what you're seeing are our attached single-family homes. Those are townhouses, and you can see that they start to move a little bit down on this on the price scale here, with the largest share being in the $400,000 to $500,000 range. And lastly, we have our condos and co-ops, which tend to be smaller in multifamily structures. The largest share here is in the $200,000 to $300,000 range. And so you could see the impact that size and whether or not a home is detached or attached those have on sales price. Next slide. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about how our neighborhoods have changed over the last few decades in terms of how affordable they are or attainable they are, and how they are becoming more and more exclusive. So as an example, I'm going to use the 20910 zip code, which is mostly downtown Silver Spring, but it includes some of the surrounding neighborhoods as well. So if you take a look at the typical home in that zip code in the year 2000, and you inflated the value of that home from 2000 to 2022 dollars, the value of that home would be $351,000 today. But in reality, the new typical home in that zip code is valued, the median value of a home in that zip code today is $692,000, nearly $700,000, nearly twice as much as what the home from 2000 would be valued today. So what does it mean in terms of how much income you need to be able to afford one of those homes? The typical home from 2000 today, you would need $78,000 in annual income to afford that typical home. But the actual typical home from today, you need about twice as much income in household income, $154,000, to be able to afford that home. That's almost $700,000. In terms of who can afford that, if you take a look at all of our county households, that typical home from 2000, 2/3 of our county households could afford to live in that typical home in 20910. But in reality today, it's less than 40%. Only 38% of our households in the county can afford the typical home in the 20910 zip code today. And what we're seeing here is something we've seen in every single zip code, every single neighborhood across the county. And it varies. Sometimes it's a little bit larger, sometimes it's not as big of a change. But we are seeing that every single neighborhood is becoming more and more difficult for people to be able to afford, for households to be able to afford. They're becoming more exclusive. A smaller share of our households are able to afford and to live in every single neighborhood. So what are we talking about? What can we, can't we do today that we're trying to address in attainable housing? Well, if you take a look at the house that you see on the left, this is typical of what we see in that tear down rebuild market today in Montgomery County. A home that's torn down is replaced with a home that maximizes essentially what's allowed in terms of height, setback, meaning the distance to the neighboring property, the distance to the street in front, and the distance to the property in the back, as well as overall lot coverage. And so this is a single family home, and this is permitted by right in 1/3 of our county today in our single family zones, where you can basically go to the Department of Permitting Services, request a permit, apply for a permit to demolish the existing home, and apply for a permit to build what you see there today. What you can't do is build what's on the right, which is the same exact structure, same building, same massing, same size, same height, same lot coverage, same distance from the neighboring houses. The only difference is this has 2 front doors because it's 2 separate units. So you can't do that today at all. So the recommendations that the planning board made cover 4 different single-family zones, and I'll show this and hopefully which will convey a little bit better what's allowed in each of these zones. But just to give you a sense of where these are, it's the R40, R60, R90, and R200 zones. So it's all the areas in the various shades of yellow with different things allowed in each of those areas. I'll also talk about the Thrive Montgomery 2050 growth corridor. So you can see them identified here on the screen, including the list of them on the left. These are growth corridors that were identified in Thrive as the areas where we want to focus growth over the coming decades in Montgomery County. These were not identified specifically through Attainable Housing, but Attainable Housing is using the growth corridors as part of its recommendations, using the growth corridors that were identified in Thrive. And lastly, this is another important geography with the Attainable Housing recommendations. This was a new concept recommended by the Planning Board, what we're calling the Priority Housing District. This is a combination of those last two maps. So what you see here is a 1 mile buffer in the bright blue, a 1 mile buffer, meaning a distance from each of our red line, purple line, and marked rail stations, and a 500-foot buffer from the center of each of those corridors where it falls into one of those 4 zones, the R40, R60, R90, and R200. So we have certain recommendations about what applies in these areas. Ultimately, the Planning Board recommended 3 different scales with 3 different recommended approaches and 3 different geographic targets. I'm going to talk in more detail about the small scale today, but just to real quickly highlight the medium and large scale, these are both focused along those derived growth corridors. For the medium scale, what we are recommending is a new option of a new method of development approval that ensures that it guarantees community input in the process. It also guarantees different county agencies get to extensively review the applications and provide comments. And the Planning Board would also have the ability to rule on whether or not the development application is approved. So that is a very similar to processes that we already have in place today. The key thing here is that it's focused on those corridors. And in exchange for smaller unit size, guaranteed smaller unit size, the applicant, the property owner, can build more units than they would otherwise be allowed. In the large scale, here we're also focused on those growth corridors, but smaller segments of them, and this would be handled through the master plan process. Here we envision creating new zones that are specific to corridors and help us achieve the type of what we've set out as our vision for or right on our corridors in Thrive, in terms of access to multiple uses and access to different forms of transportation, transit, bike lanes, and also, a very pedestrian oriented feel. So those are the larger and medium scale, again, focused on the corridors, not in the heart of our single family neighborhoods. So the small scale is where we are talking about those single family neighborhoods, the R40, R60, R90, and R200 zones. We're recommending duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes in certain places. These, again, would be, they would be required to stay within the existing standards, development standards that we apply to a single family home. So the same setbacks from the neighboring properties, from the front street, the same lot coverage requirements or limits, and the same height limits as well. A couple of things that are a little unique here is that, well, first, it would be allowed by right, just like a single family home is today, but with one little caveat, and that would be that you would have to be in conformance with what we're referring to as a pattern book, and I'll explain that in just a second. So this is a new slide. If you've seen any of our previous ones, we wanted to give a little bit more clarity. So what the board has recommended in terms of where duplexes would be allowed, it would be allowed under the board's recommendation in all 4 of those zones, throughout those zones, R40, R60, R90, and R200. So that's everything you see there in the olive color on the map on the right. Now, with regard to triplexes, these would be allowed by right in all throughout R40, R60, and R90, but in the R200 zone, only in the priority housing district. So you could see when we went from the last map to this map, the area starts to shrink in terms of where we would allow triplexes and focus more and more on our inner suburbs and those corridors. And then lastly, where the board would recommend quadplexes, 4-unit structures, only in the priority housing district, not throughout our neighborhoods. So this is focused on those areas that are within 1 mile of our transit stations and right along the corridors. So you can see, again, it shrunk further. So I mentioned before the pattern book. Any applicant for a
duplex, triplex, or quadplex would need to be in conformance with this pattern book, which is essentially a visual representation of our zoning code and zoning standards. So it would talk about massing, neighborly house details such as front porches or patios or sunrooms, and how you can accommodate those on a site. Not that you would have to have those. On-site parking and how you can accommodate that on different sized lots, different configurations of lots, different shapes of lots in each of the different types of zones, and where you could place the building, again, within those standards that are required, and how it speaks and communicates in ways with that front road. And the last thing I want to highlight in terms of the planning board's recommendations and relating back to that priority housing district is the parking requirements. So today, if you could build a duplex, you would be required to do 2 on-site or off-street parking, a minimum of 2 per unit. So that duplex would require 4 spaces on the property. What the board has recommended is outside that priority housing district, if there's no street parking present, you would still be required to build those 4 spaces. There'd be no reduction in that minimum. If there is street parking present, then there would be a 50% reduction, meaning that duplex would only require 2 total spaces for the 2 units. If you're inside the priority housing district and there's no street parking present, the board recommended that same 50% reduction. But if there is street parking present, then the board recommended a 75% reduction in parking. So that would be only 1 space for the 2 duplex units. And so I just want to highlight here on this last, before we turn to questions, if you scan that QR code on the left, that will bring you to a copy of the presentation that I just gave. And if you scan the QR code to the right, that will be an opportunity for you to be able to provide additional comments and questions, and just in case we don't get to your question or comment. So pass it back to President Friedson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Thank you to Director Sartori. We're now going to turn it over to Jordan to facilitate questions and comments, which is the real reason why we're here this afternoon. Given we have hundreds of people on this virtual session, so we can hear from as many of you as possible, we aren't going to respond to each question or a comment, but as has been the case at all of the listening sessions throughout the county, staff is tracking all the questions, comments, and concerns, and will be providing them to all council members, in addition to what we receive through the portal. And the portal will be open following this listening session as well. So if you don't get a chance to make your comments or ask your questions or raise your concerns, you'll have the opportunity to do that through the portal as we move forward through this process. With that, let me turn it over to you, Jordan, so we can get to the feedback that we want to hear from residents.
Great. Thank you so much, Council President. Now we're going to proceed to the Q&A portion. We kindly ask again that you raise your hand, and I will call on participants in the order that their hands are raised. Just for those who don't know, the raised hand icon can be found on the bottom of the Zoom menu panel. Click the participants button on the menu panel with the hand icon. Select raise hand, and I will then call on the participants accordingly. In order to hear from as many people as possible today, we do ask that you try to keep your questions and comments to about 45 seconds. The timer will be located right here on my screen, okay? So we'll go ahead and get started and see who has their hand raised. Up first, I see Miss Sarah Steffens. Hi, Sarah. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm very well. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. I just want to point everyone's attention to how this works if you're in a priority housing district. For example, I'm on a 16-foot street directly behind Connecticut Avenue. We have parking on one side of the street. Cars can barely pass when there is a parked car. Yet you are suggesting that quadplexes be allowed on my street, and under the attainable housing optional method, we can also have stacked flats, small townhouses, and small apartment buildings under a streamlined process. And I guess my comment is I don't see how this works. Similarly, I don't see how folks can walk over a mile to the metro station and just not have a car. And I'll stop there. I know you have lots of feedback coming.
Thank you, Sarah. Up next, we have Al Carr. Al?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for holding these sessions. I live in Kensington, and I ride the MARC train into work every day. And I also ride Metro every day. And one of these things is not like the other. So in Kensington, we have 7 trains in the morning, 7 trains back at night. It is unidirectional. There is one place that you can board the train with 2 doors. The conductor comes down with a little yellow stool. You have to climb onto the stool and climb up the steps. There are about 100 riders per day. And it's not the same as Metro, with Metro having 6 and 8 car trains coming every 6 minutes, every 8 minutes, many, many wide doors. So I would love to, at some point, get an explanation of the logic. I understand the concept of putting density near transit, but what I don't understand is the logic of treating all transit the same, saying that MARC is identical to Metro, is identical to the Purple Line. It would be my dream if we were to quadruple MARC service, but even if that happens, it still would not be anywhere close to Metro. Garrett Park even has a fraction of the ridership of Kensington. So that is my comment, looking for some intellectual honesty in the plan.
Thank you, Al. Up next, we have Ryan Murphy.
Hi, thank you. So I'm here today to express my strong support for the Attainable Housing Strategies proposal, and I wish that they went even further. I'm a single-family homeowner in Rockville that welcomes rather than fears having more neighbors. And I believe that people not fortunate enough to afford a single-family home in Montgomery County should still have the opportunity to live here. In addition to making housing more affordable, any exclusionary zoning would help grow the tax base and also reduce carbon emissions by reducing sprawl and reliance on cars. I know you've been hearing from a lot of folks that are afraid of change and either out of ignorance or selfishness think a duplex will somehow ruin their lives. However, objective surveys show that these folks are in the minority. More importantly, what no survey or community meeting can capture is the voices of those that want to live here but currently can't afford to. I know some folks on the council mentioned balancing the need to make it more affordable for people to have somewhere to live with concerns about neighborhood character. And frankly, I think it's absurd to even put those concerns in the same ballpark. It's more important for people to be able to afford to have homes. Therefore, I think it is important for the future of this region and for Montgomery County to pursue the attainable housing strategies. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Up next, we have Liz Purcell.
Thank you. My name is Liz Purcell. I am a member of River Road Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Bethesda, as well as Action in Montgomery. My eldest daughter has developmental disabilities, is on the autism spectrum, and does not speak. For most of her life, my husband and I have worried about where she would live when we could no longer care for her. After waiting 10 years, she received a housing voucher from Housing Opportunities Commission. It was then that I realized how dire the housing situation is in Montgomery County for people with minimal incomes. While my daughter is now settled in her own apartment, this experience deeply motivated me to make sure the supply of attainable housing in our county is significantly increased. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Liz. Next, we have Stacy W. Hi, Stacy.
Yeah. Hi, all. My name is Stacy Wells. I'm a current resident of Rockville. I have been Maryland, Montgomery County, born and raised. I am in support of the majority of these proposals to increase the supply of attainable housing. As a 27-year-old, this area has become increasingly expensive and cost prohibitive, and I actually plan to leave the area within the next few years. Even though I've lived here for my entire life, I don't expect to be able to own a home here in the future. And I don't expect many of my peers to be able to own a home as well. So I do support most of the proposals. I do just want to say that I think keeping in mind parking and the need for cars in this area is important as you do plan those proposals. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Stacy. Up next, we have Josh Silver. Hi, Josh.
Did I unmute?
Yes, you did. We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for holding this important hearing. I just want to voice strong support for the overall point of this of the proposal. I live next door to a McMansion that has 2 people in it, empty nesters. That's probably about 6,000 square feet. And it destroyed a house that was about 2,000 square feet. If we continue on this path, we are only going to get affluent people living in our neighborhoods. And we are going to choke on car exhaust. We're going to choke on exclusionary zoning. We need a diversity of housing types so that young families and people just starting off and modest income people can afford. I'd rather have a teacher and a janitor living in a duplex next to me than an empty nester that probably has $1 million in annual income. We need diversity. This single-family zoning, the history of it was racial segregation, and we need to increase diversity and income diversity in our neighborhoods, and we need to thrive. And the way to do this is to have a variety of housing choices, including single-family housing, duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes where it's appropriate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh. Up next, we have Susan Kahn. Hi, Susan.
Hi, my name is Susan Kahn from the Village of Martin's Additions in Chevy Chase. Why don't you work with residents across the county to create a plan for affordable housing? This deceptive plan that I oppose does a bait and switch by saying we have an affordable housing crisis, but coming up with an attainable housing plan that lacks studies of local impacts, and that's a giveaway to developers. They'll profit on building high-income housing on prime real estate while residents bear the infrastructure costs and environmental impact. The costs for better water and sewer lines, schools, roads, and drainage from more runoff will be borne by residents whose taxes will skyrocket and by municipalities that may go bankrupt in the process. This plan breaks the bonds of neighbor to neighbor by reducing our input about what happens in our areas and causing us to be displaced. Why not work with county residents to create a genuine plan for affordable housing? Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Up next, we have Dom. Hi, Dom.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dom Poehler. I am a homeowner in Silver Spring, and I am for the attainable housing strategy that the Planning Board has put forward. These changes are going to empower homeowners, enable growth, and decrease stress on our county's infrastructure. This expanded zoning is going to allow homeowners to actually renovate and expand their homes to better suit the needs of their family and their community. This is also going to be a boon for our county's tax base because having density is going to allow more people to live near transit and to put less stress on our infrastructure, meaning that we have more money for our schools, our parks, and just general infrastructure needs for our county. This density is also going to better our transit, and it's also going to mean that we don't need to have to worry about traffic as much because people are going to be living near transit-oriented developments. They're going to be able to live car-free lifestyles. So, and we're going to have less people commuting from Frederick County because that's right where most people are going. I do encourage this to be accepted and for it to be another tool because we are doing social housing. We are doing transit-oriented development, but this is going to help us have another tool to combat unaffordability. Thank you.
Thank you, Dom. Up next, we have Sue Present. Hi, Sue.
Hi. I support fair, safe, affordable, and appropriate housing. I oppose the recommendations. Planners misinformed us. the impacts on delivery of safe and adequate drinking water and critical water capacity for our fire hydrants are not regulated by the current policies. WSSC was not apprised of the recommendations until 3 weeks ago. Don't globally upzone our neighborhoods, but curb mansionization. Offer incentives in exchange for deed restrictions that halt destruction and expansion of single-family homes that exist, and put houses for lower-income homeowners on available county land in our neighborhoods. In just 1 year, we could add 200 houses. Please read my full comments, which support the Civic Fed's resolution on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Up next, we have Pavy Bacon. Hi, Pavy.
Hi, I'm Pavi, a mom of 2 kids, 12 and 9, and we live in East Silver Spring. I was one of the first to take advantage of the recent zoning changes that allowed ADUs in areas that were previously zoned only for single-family homes. Thanks to this policy, my parents now live in an ADU in our backyard, keeping our family close and connected. Policies like these, along with converting large houses into 2, 3, or 4 units, or building new house-like structures, give families more housing options. These choices allow people to stay in their community when their housing needs change, instead of being forced to move away. I believe these changes are crucial for creating a stronger, more inclusive county where both our economy and citizens can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Pavi. Up next, we have Catherine Denby. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, my name is Catherine Denby. I'm a resident and homeowner in Chevy Chase Village, as well as someone who was born and grew up in Chevy Chase Village. Annex D of the Montgomery County Planning Attainable Housing Strategies report, there's a discussion of similar missing middle reforms in other municipal jurisdictions across the country. The purported intent of this rezoning proposal in Montgomery County is to increase housing affordability. However, clearly the citizens, including myself, have a vested interest to make sure the end result is not a handout or profit grab for the real estate industry. In particular, given the high propensity of real estate interest and donations to some of the council members' fundraising efforts, including those of President Friedman in the past 6 years, you can understand why people would be interested in more information. And in these comparable jurisdictions, is there data about how many of these new units constructed in the wake of the zoning changes actually went to benefit low or middle income families, as opposed to providing maximal profit to real estate developers, home flippers, and the like? As a resident who supports affordable housing, but is concerned about this being a boon to the real estate community, orchestrated and funded in part by the real estate community and cloaked as an initiative for affordable housing, I would be very interested in seeing this data and urge the county to undertake a commission that studies facts along these lines, so we can see by analogy who the true beneficiaries of the proposed zoning changes would be here.
Thank you, Catherine. Up next, we have the Donahue Company.
Hi, yeah, I'm sorry, I couldn't change the name. My name is Chris Brew. I live in downtown Bethesda. So I wish we had more than one option here instead of an all or nothing. Let me explain. I was recently in Boulder, Colorado, went through an R60 or single family neighborhood of $1 million homes. There were a dozen duplexes. I had no idea until I drove through that neighborhood about 5 times because they looked like every other house, rhythm, massing, etc. And I think where you're losing me and many of my neighbors is when we hear about mini apartment buildings in single family neighborhoods, when we hear about townhomes in single family neighborhoods. And I think if there was a middle ground option, walking before we run kind of theory, where we can embrace, I think people would embrace duplexes. I have no doubt people would embrace duplexes. You're losing people when you throw in the quads, the townhomes, and the mini apartment buildings. So if you could do something other than vote this completely up or down, I think you might make some progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Shazka, correct me if I'm wrong.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. I think the majority of people who are unhappy with this proposal are absolutely in favor of affordable housing and want to address the problems that people have to find housing that they can afford in our county. The problem that people have with this plan is that the Attainable Housing Plan is market-based. So at its heart, what it's about, all you're saying is, we're going to create smaller units that cost less. That's all it is. Now tell people, either a family with 2 spouses or single parents with children, how are they going to squeeze into a 1 or 2 bedroom condo that's in a quadplex in the middle of a residential neighborhood? It doesn't work. The firefighter who was referred to at the Bethesda Chevy Chase meeting last week was cited as moving to Frederick because that person could not find a home, a single family home in Montgomery County. That firefighter is not going to take their budget of $700,000 and find a home comparable in Montgomery County with this plan. They'll get a 1 to 2 bedroom condo because this is market priced. And so by equating those who are unhappy with this proposal as being opposed to affordable housing is unfair and not accurate. Now,
Thank you, Shasta. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry.
No, and go to 3600 Walsh Street.
Okay, thank you. Up next, we have Melinda Power. Hi, Melinda.
Thank you. I'm not opposed to expansive zoning in principle, but I am opposed to doing so without substantial infrastructure investments to address the needs this is going to create. As the owner of a home in East Bethesda, I've seen firsthand how the infrastructure is not kept up with the development despite plans that are supposed to address this. When my kid was in first grade, there were 38 kids in my son's first grade class by the second week of school, but there was no opportunity to add another classroom because there simply wasn't the space in the building. Similarly, the bigger footprint of the new homes in the area and the requirement for dry wells for runoff means the soil is always waterlogged. My street regularly floods. The sewer system is overwhelmed. My neighbor's basements flood. Adding more large footprints and more hard surfaces for parking means that this is going to increase. Our road isn't wide enough for 2 cars to pass. Adding more cars is going to require making streets one way. And the off-street parking really needs to be linked to frontage, because right now adding more cars than available is the current kind of proposal here is going to have more cars than off-street parking is available. And finally, walkability and bikeability in Bethesda has not improved, but has in fact deteriorated with the loss of the trail. And the increased population density that we have is just increasing congestion. So Bethesda is kind of an example of if the infrastructure doesn't leave, this increased density isn't working quite as well as it could. Thank you.
Thank you, Melinda. Thank you. Up next, we have Roy. Hi, Roy.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call. First of all, I want to thank everybody who's attempting to address this really serious problem. I wanted to just make an observation. Sometime at the end of May, there was a report produced by the Policy Task Force for Accessory Dwelling Units. It was presented to Governor Westmore. And there were 2 items that caught my attention. One was that the housing shortage in Maryland is now at 96,000 units. And every year, the growth rate is 5,600 a year. Now, at the beginning of this meeting, a number of people introduced themselves and spoke. And they said things like, there is nothing before us. This is the beginning and not the end. Slow and steady is going to win the race. There is no immediate pressure for a decision. 5,600 units a year is the shortfall. Over the 3 years it's taken to produce this report, that amounts to 16,800. So how is it not urgent? And how is this small attempt to produce, let's say, 200 additional units a year going to do anything? But I know people are going to say every little
Roy,
bit.
I'm so sorry, but your time is up. But thank you so much for your comment.
how this really addresses the larger problem.
Thank you. Up next, we have Ross Hamilton. Hi, Ross.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking time to host these listening sessions. I just thought I would add some quick commentary as a recent resident of Bethesda, Maryland. I live in Woodacres. One of the reasons I ended up here is, having lived in Arlington for years, we couldn't find single family homes in Arlington that were affordable. One of the reasons was that the quote starter homes were being purchased by developers for prices that were in far excess of what anybody else would pay for those properties. I do worry that while we're trying to make housing more affordable, that we're actually going to reduce our affordable single family home stock as a result of this. Second piece is, being a resident of Woodacres is great. Our houses are quite small in comparison due to our HOA that prevents teardowns. We are on it, what you guys have classified as a growth corridor of River Road, which I think is funny. We have no transit and we have no roads that can handle, at least internally, the traffic. And I do worry that if we supersede our HOA with these rules, we will go from having 2,000 square foot homes to giant duplexes and triplexes. And I'm just worried that we're going in the wrong direction trying to solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Up next, we have Tony. Hi, Tony.
Hello, my name is Tony Byrne. Thank you, Ms. Lindsay, Council President Friedson. I own a home, my wife and I own a home in the North Woodside neighborhood. We both had the luxury, I would say, the benefit of growing up in neighborhoods outside of Maryland where there were duplexes, triplexes, small apartment buildings, all interwoven in among itself. So it was a very healthy community. It allowed for people to move up and down the ladder, great diversity and socioeconomic and racial and other factors. And when we moved to Montgomery County, we were shocked at what seemed like a kind of a quasi-apartheid, where apartments weren't allowed in single-family home neighborhoods, and there's very sharp divisions. Then, of course, we discovered the historical basis for this. And so my question really is, are we sure that this is going far enough? Are we sure, given the urgent need for additional supply that everyone acknowledges, are we pushing the envelope more here, first of all? And secondly, what can we do to open up residential neighborhoods to more renters? The majority of people in this county are renters. We should not be excluding them from the benefits that the rest of us enjoy if we're going to have a healthy, fair, and just set of communities. So I would hope, Mr. Harris, and that you would push a little harder to do more to increase supply sooner. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Up next, we have Joe Gilzeppe. Hi, Joe.
Yeah, hi, it's Joe Gillespie. I want to thank the planning board for their recommendations on this issue and the council for their courage in allowing this work to continue. The report, I think, is incredibly well researched, and this multi-year public endeavor has confirmed the urgency of the county's housing crisis with, quite frankly, overwhelming data, and has produced great strategies for helping increase the housing supply in the county. When I first gave feedback on the early work on this topic in 2021, I explained that I think the county should move urgently on this because the everyday old, relatively affordable housing continues to be torn down and rebuilt as more single-family housing. Every day the council waits on these recommendations, opportunities to build more housing are missed. And on top of that, on a personal note, while I own a home in Montgomery County, I'm calling in today from Paris, France, where my family and I have moved temporarily. Here, my family, every family we know, lives in a very dense city full of apartments, and it's fine. The idea that I've heard suggested that families can't live in duplexes or apartments is, I think, entirely misguided, and it runs contradictory to my own experience living in apartments and single-family homes and other types of housing around the country and in Montgomery County. And so I know while legislation isn't pending today, I urge the council to take action now, and we all need to do our part to increase the housing supply. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Up next, we have Housing Unlimited. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. This is Abe Shuckman with Housing Unlimited. I've been an affordable housing developer here in Montgomery County for the past 30 years. And I want to applaud Council President Friedson and the entire county council for their unprecedented commitment to affordable housing in recent years. Affordable housing, no doubt, takes enormous resources and thoughtful care and planning. And I've been very impressed with the council president and the members of the county council in sort of putting money and resources into this important work of affordable housing. I think the general thrust of the policies are excellent. I do understand the point that some of these zoning policies have to be paired with resources to make sure that the affordable housing aspect of the zoning change indeed comes to fruition. Thank you so much, and I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Up next, we have Abby Milstein. Hi, Abby.
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to address you, President Friedson, and the rest of the Planning Board. As you all know, and as I have testified many times, the community of Lux Manor, in which I live, has been subjected to extreme infrastructure concerns. We have had massive flooding incidents that have been catastrophic and have destroyed many of the homes that our community resides in. For years, I have testified about infrastructure growth, and we have been supportive of missing middle and attainable housing in the Pike and Rose development along Old Georgetown Road, as well as along what is now Executive Boulevard and proposed attainable housing development within those areas. The community of Lux Manor has unfortunately borne the brunt of poor management of infrastructure when it has come to stormwater management, electricity management, gas management, and all these other infrastructure projects. To continue on this change of zoning in small residential communities such as ours will continue to be devastating. Right now, we are about to enter into a multi-million-dollar restoration stream project in our community. And I just want you to bear these projects in mind as we move forward with changes to the attainable housing plans and future growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby. Up next, we have Frederick Marinucci. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Hi, Frederick.
Okay. I'm a homeowner in North Bethesda. I want to compliment the planning board and the council for having the courage to take on this crisis. The local target project identified 30,000 new units that had to be developed in the county to meet the housing need between 2020 and 2029. At this point, we've been averaging 2,400 new units over the past 4 years. To make that goal, we have to increase it by 50% to 3,600. Something's got to change to get there. And this is a modest and long overdue proposal to do that. I'd like to point out, though, that the OLO study connected with rent stabilization highlighted that 1 in 4 renting households in Montgomery County is paying over 50% of their income for housing. So we need more affordable housing. And specifically, the middle scale development proposes units up to 19 units. I propose that the council consider raising that to a density bonus of 1 to get up to affordable housing MPDU requirements to address that need. Thank you for your attention, and I urge you to consider this and move aggressively to implement these.
Great, thank you, Frederick. Up next, we have Mort. Hi, Mort. Do we have Mort next? I see your hand raised. I'll give you a few seconds to come on. Mort. Okay, let's move on to the next person. And Mort, if we have to come back, we will. Okay. Up next, we have Droller A. I think now we can probably hear you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for taking the time today. I know this is a tough thing. I oppose the plan in its current form because I think it doesn't take into account individual communities and the different infrastructure challenges that and individual communities have. And a lot of people have already spoken to this. So I live in South Four Corners. This is one of those neighborhoods that has a lot of very small old houses built in the 1940s and 1950s. Most people do not have garages or driveways, and we rely upon street parking. The idea, and it's in a priority housing district, so the idea that you could have a bunch of quadplexes put into our neighborhood where everybody already uses street parking is completely inadequate. There is no way our neighborhood can actually sustain that level of parking. Just because you are limiting the parking minimums, that doesn't mean people aren't going to bring in cars. Of course they are. So it's just going to completely overwhelm the parking in our community because there's no limiting principle. And it might be that, you know, it happens slowly, but again, there's no limiting principle in this plan. And over time, this could overwhelm different communities. So I really would encourage you to take a step back and create a plan that addresses individual communities where they are. The only other thing I wanted to add is that I think it's unfair that you're putting all this mostly on the down county area. Predominantly, there are other areas like Clarksburg and Sandy Springs and a ton of other areas that I think need to share the burden of the affordable housing in our community. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. We're going to go back to Mort. Are you able to unmute yourself? I'll give you a few seconds to do that, Mort. M-O-R-T. No? Okay, let's move on to Philly. Hi, Philly.
Hello, this is my wife, Philly Sino, and I'm Dustin Summy. We're residents of Woodside Forest in Silver Spring. Like the previous speaker, it's a small community built in the 1940s with small houses, typically about 1,300 square feet plus a basement. We typically don't have garages or any off-street parking. And I mean, the gentleman said perfectly what I was going to say. I was just commenting. The main thing that I find wrong with this proposal is not the sort of idea of it. It's about it's about that there's no limiting principle. You're instituting a tragedy of the commons situation where the shared resources in the community will be converted to profit for developers, and then the residents will be left with a community that is no longer profitable to develop in because it's not desirable to live in once it's overcrowded and the infrastructure is saturated. So I very strongly hope that the council will reformulate this into something that more responsibly addresses the pressing need for affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Philly. Up next, we have Faye B. Hi, Faye.
Hello. All right. I second many of the comments that have already been made. I am in the Tilden Woods neighborhood, which is right next to Lux Manor. And one of the impacts we have is coming off Montrose Road. When that was changed, it changed the traffic flow in my neighborhood, especially school buses coming into the schools no longer run on roads that have double lines down the middle. We don't have sidewalks. It makes it very unsafe. So again, we don't have infrastructure that's being built, especially schools. The schools along Josiah Henson Parkway are being routed into Lux Manor. A lot of the development that is currently going on is not matched by other infrastructure developments such as schools. So thank you very much for addressing this. I think the planning board has taken a very narrow view of development. Thank you.
Thank you, Faye. Up next, we have Brian Cannon. Hi, Brian.
Thank you. I live, I guess, in ground zero of a growth corridor. I've had 25 happy years here, and I regret to say, I'm sort of doomed by this proposal personally. I actually support most of what you're doing. I really encourage in the next steps a much more deliberate, granular, and coherent approach to planning the upheavals that you propose for the growth corridor neighborhoods. My neighborhood has been lucky and it's existed for 100 years as a coherent entity, but what you guys are describing in general, and Director Sartori didn't really talk about, is perhaps shoehorning relatively large buildings into existing settings without a great deal of overall rational, coherent, comprehensive planning. And it encompasses vehicle access as well as just how do you do it in a piecemeal manner. I'd much rather have my block condemned and master planned than suffer the gradual arrival of different 19-unit apartment buildings and townhouses over the next 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Jacob Goldberg. Hi, Jacob.
I'm Jacob Goldberg. My fiance and I just bought a home in Silver Spring this year. We're super excited about our house. We love our neighborhood. We love that we're able to build our future in this community. Last week there was an annual chili cook-off, which we're excited to participate in going forward. But one thing that we noticed during this event is that we are decades younger than all of our neighbors. The closest people in our age to our age were their kids. And I think that just highlights a big issue that we see with these types of forums. The people who benefit from these changes are not necessarily at the table, which is unfortunate. So, you know, for a lot of our friends, they're not able to join us in home ownership because unless they are like us, dual income families with no kids, with either one or both of the partners being a doctor, lawyer, or other high income earner, it's just not possible in this area to own a home. And that's really unfortunate. I think one thing that's been mentioned in previous events is the bristling at the word exclusionary. And I think it is important to remember that the history of zoning laws are to exclude people from certain communities. They came about in the late 60s and early 70s as a response to the Fair Housing Act and the Civil Rights Act, and it's well past time to respond to that appropriately. Thank you.
Jacob. Thank you. Up next, we have Stuart. Hi, Stuart. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for organizing this. I'm Stuart Dwyer. I moved to Friendship Heights 2 years ago. 1,400 multifamily housing units are currently under construction or planned for delivery in this neighborhood within the coming years. 5 blocks down River Road, we've got hundreds of townhomes and apartments under construction at Westbard. I'm not opposed to this development. What does concern me is the flawed rationale underlying priority housing districts that assumes metro is the answer to the transit needs of ever denser settlement. Studies indicate now that trips increasingly take place between activity centers, not suburbs to downtown and back, for which metro was largely conceived over 50 years ago. Incoming residents who are going to occupy these new developments will have cars, and they will cause congestion absent far more aggressive public transit development than anything I've seen contemplated. Allowing multiplexes in the narrow streets designed for single-family homes surrounding Friendship Heights would compound those issues to the nth degree. I strongly urge the council to reject or reformulate the proposals under consideration. Let's leverage infill opportunities that make sense, including office conversions, for example, and let's be aggressive about developing the world-class transit that's required as a true foundation for growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Up next, we have Melissa. Good afternoon, Melissa.
Hi, my name is Melissa and I live in North Chevy Chase Village. I'm one of the young families who moved into this house after the pandemic and had to endure bidding wars and extremely high interest rates to buy our first starter home in our 40s. And now our house is zoned blue or optional tear down, I guess, to build affordable housing optional method. when I've seen in our neighborhood luxury apartments being built for more than what my house is worth, luxury townhouses right down the street for more than what my house is worth. There are many of us that are young. I'm worried about losing my house to developers after I'm one of the people that is trying that also had to rent for thousands of dollars per month until we could afford to buy. I'm also worried about many people who moved into this neighborhood and are already not upkeeping their properties. And there's young families like me trying to move in and revive it. With this pass, are they just going to let their houses, they're going to sell to developers anyway, so they're going to let it rot? And part of the reason we were maybe able to move in is we're on the on-ramp. Jonesbridge, Connecticut, Kensington already blocks up the second DC floods out to our to the freeway. How many more people are going to block our neighborhood and we're going to be locked out or locked in and unable to travel?
Thank you, Melissa, for your comment. Up next, we have Teresa. Good afternoon, Teresa.
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I live in Rock Creek Forest, and our community already has condos, already has apartments, and already has single-family homes. We are being invaded by McMansions, which I would like to stop because the smaller, more appropriately sized homes for the lots are getting torn down and McMansions are being built. But we already have all kinds of affordable housing available to us. Number one, this is important enough that should go to referendum. It's not for the planning board or the council to have the final say on this. This should be a vote by the members of Montgomery County, the residents of Montgomery County, residents, not other people, residents of Montgomery County. Number two, what are you going to do about trees? What are you going to do about sewage? What are you going to do about trash? Those are my questions.
Thank you for that, Teresa. Up next, we have AHCMC. Hello.
Hello, hi. Eva Lewis. I'm the executive director for the Affordable Housing Conference of Montgomery County. I want to thank President Freeman and the council and the planning board for their initiative and their recommendations. We do support that. My organization has been in existence since 1991, where we put on a big conference every year about affordable housing. And as you all probably can guess, it has not gotten better, it has gotten worse. And so I just want to relay this. I know this was said at the top by the President Friedson. This is just one tool in the toolbox. It is not perfect. That is why they're bringing it to us right now. And I appreciate the council and the planning board for working on this. And I hope we can pass some of these initiatives in the coming future so that people can afford to live in the great county of Montgomery County. So thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Up next, we have Brenda Freeman. Brenda Freeman. Good afternoon, Brenda.
Hi, I hope I'm unmuted.
You're on when you muted.
Okay, I am opposed to this plan as it is currently in its current form, because we got into this mess based on the planning board's manufactured changes of racism, based on claims that restrictive covenants that expired over 70 years ago meant that homeowners benefited from racism. Well, thank you very much, because I live in Woodside Park, which is one of the first areas to remove this covenants. But yet we are being targeted, whereas the county council is not looking at areas where outside of 20910, which is preferred by the developers because they can get more money, where they could actually build affordable housing, where you could actually address the issues of attainable housing, but you're not doing that. My second concern is what you're doing is this nonsense about trying to tell people to get out of their cars. People need cars, okay? People need cars. Your transportation system will never be adequate. So let's face the facts and deal with the issue of danger by design. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Up next, we have Genevieve McDowell. Hi, Genevieve.
Hi, make sure I'm not muted. My name is Genevieve McDowell Owen. I've lived in North Woodside for 24 years. I own my own single family home. And I'm really concerned as I get older that there is nowhere for me to downsize to in Montgomery County. I'm strongly in favor of this proposal because I see no mobility happening in all these single family neighborhoods. I need a place for my young daughter to be able to afford to move into, and I need a place for my husband and I to downsize into, and that kind of thing is not happening in my neighborhood. So I would like to see more housing options in here. I'd like to be able to turn my 100-year-old bungalow into a duplex so that my daughter could live in an independent home, but nearby. I want to also acknowledge that Montgomery County is already an affordable housing leader and has increased their affordable housing, and that a lot of this is about, I like that this is about finding attainable housing, housing at all levels. We need housing from, subsidized housing, which I know that y'all are working on, all the way up to, more $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 housing. And my time is up.
Oh, thank you, Genevieve. Thank you. Up next, we have David Woodward. Hi, David.
Hey, I grew up here and I'm 29. I came with remarks prepared about how, growing up as a young person in a single family house was more difficult than growing up in a townhouse because you have less friends around you and you can't drive anywhere. But I just checked the news and, I feel like we all could use a little bit of perspective about where the real ground zero is. Bangladesh is underwater. Over 1 million people have been displaced. Those numbers are only going up in my lifetime. There are real infrastructure challenges, but I do think these changes are a step in the right direction if we're ever going to get people out of cars. Because that's, and there are interviews, you can look it up. Bangladeshis say that the reason their country's flooded is because Americans like lawns and they like SUVs. And it's true. And, I think this is a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Up next, we have Stephanie. Good afternoon, Stephanie.
Here we go. Okay, sorry. Hi, yes, my name's Stephanie Moslowski. I wanted to thank you for this opportunity. I recently moved here from Sacramento, California to North Bethesda, and I'm actually very impressed by the Planning Board's recommendations. Wish we had more of that in Sacramento. I first wish to state that I am in favor of the Attainable Housing Initiative, and I look forward to watching it evolve. In particular, I'm strongly in favor of improved public transportation. That's one of the reasons why we moved to the North Bethesda area when we moved out here. I've reviewed and attended most of the sessions that have been discussing the pros and cons with what is available. And it seems what does seem to be lacking are provisions for individual oversight of locations where a single family home might be turned into, for example, a fourplex, which is a common concern. I don't think that's where this is going, but I think it's a possibility the way it's written. Issues that are of concern include parking, preservation of green space, infrastructure. These are older communities. There's a lot of old infrastructure, and with the increasing moisture from climate change, it just adds on pressure to those areas. It appears that from the way things are written, it appears that a lot of an older home that's demolished, okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. Up next, we have Tyler with AHC.
Oh, I'm up.
Yeah, we can.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. So I grew up just north of Montgomery County, right on the border with Frederick County, but my grandmother lives in Montgomery County, and it's kind of always been my dream to live in Montgomery County. I'm getting married next year, and my fiance and I are thinking about where we want to live, and we'd love for that to be Montgomery County, but as it stands, we simply cannot afford a home there. This kind of regulatory change would allow greater optionality for people like us who don't necessarily qualify for affordable housing, but aren't millionaires who can put a $200,000 down payment on a home to get our foot in the door in an area that we would love to call home, with great schools, great services, and things of that nature. I do agree with some comments that were made earlier, specifically by Abe Shookman, that for this to result in more affordable housing, this does need to be paired with other resources specifically targeted to affordable housing. The county does a great job of funding things like the HIF fund and the Nonprofit Preservation Fund. And more resources to things like that paired with this will lead to the affordable housing that I think many people in this call have shown support for. And I would just would like to point out also that nothing is predetermined just because of regulatory changes. Just because these changes go into effect does not mean a quadplex is going to be dropped right next door to you. It's not been the case in Minneapolis and other places where this has happened. So I would just encourage folks to keep an open mind and know that the regulatory changes just lead to more flexibility, but not any predetermined outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Up next, we have Mila Williams. Hi, Mila.
Hi, I live in Bethesda. If I understand correctly, the term attainable housing refers to housing for which a mortgage would currently require a household income of something above $68,000. That's what I infer from the data that I've heard. It's critical the County Council and Planning Board ensure that higher density at market pricing won't have the unintended result of an increase in the supply of unattainable housing, as has been the case with newly constructed townhomes selling for over $1 million in Bethesda. Given that the Attainable Housing Strategy Initiative as proposed does not take account of relative land values within the county, how will the council ensure that its approach will actually result in an increased supply of attainable housing, particularly in our county's higher land value zip codes? And importantly, what metrics will the council and planning board use to monitor whether the goal of an increased supply of attainable housing is actually being achieved? A 2023 Urban Institute study found no statistically significant evidence that additional lower cost units became available or less expensive as a result of increased density aimed at reducing housing costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mila. Up next, we have Maya Mahorta. Hi, Maya.
Hi there. Yes, this seems to be extremely piecemeal, very puzzling, because I live in North Chevy Chase, where the lot sizes are from 5,000 to 15,000. How would you put a duplex or quadruplex on a small lot size? Is it going to be setbacks will be the same? This is going to make a lot of difference to parking as well, where you park, because the streets are very narrow, designed for small single family houses in an era when a family owned only one car. So, and as other people have said, it needs much more aggressive transportation development and the nightmare of infrastructure not matching your increased density. Now, I have noticed when development takes place, like on Manor Road, where one entity owned the whole lot where there were these townhouses, they have totally demolished everything so they can, in a holistic way, plan and develop. But piecemeal, small houses on 5,000 square foot lots. You showed an idealized version of a McMansion, which is turned into a duplex. And I presume it has on a lot that is rather adequate. So this seems puzzling and piecemeal and unsatisfactory, what you've described.
Thank you, Maya, for that comment. Up next, we have NHVB. How are you doing? Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for providing the opportunity. I'm a homeowner in Silver Spring. I love my street. It's, I also love dense urban places like Logan Circle in Paris. But currently, there are no sidewalks on my street. It's a two-way street. It's one lane for getting through. I love to walk. I'm big. I try to not use my car ever. I use a lot of public transportation, but I have to look behind my back constantly in order to make sure I'm not getting run over by people, cutting through the streets. I agree with others. I think if this is somehow modified to make sure that it does address affordable housing and that infrastructure concerns that we've been raised, including school capacity, are actually addressed and not just be like, oh, we'll figure it out, or it's going to be fine. No, there's not. It just seems like this is. I think that's why you're hearing a lot of pushback, because you have it's not really addressing our concerns. I think that someone else mentioned if you were just saying duplexes, I don't think you would hear so much opposition. But I don't understand how we're going to maintain characters of neighborhoods and ensure affordable housing in the current plan. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Up next, we have Jeff D. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, good morning. Afternoon, sorry. My name is Jeffrey D. I'm the president and CEO of Habitat for Humanity Metro Maryland. Yesterday, we celebrated 100 years of Jimmy Carter, and we applaud the work of Council President Friedson and the Planning Board for bringing forth this topic to have this conversation. We think this is a good first step. We believe in an all of the above strategy, and it's not going to, we're not going to be able to solve the affordable housing crisis, not only in Montgomery County, but this country, by trying to limit one thing. And I think people brought up some very good points about infrastructure, and we are generally supportive of these ideas, with asking that there be incentives for people who are creating deeper levels of affordability for homes, and also mechanisms to prevent displacement. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jeff. Up next, we have Corinne Marie. Hi, Corinne.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for your time. I don't really have any prepared comments. This is all very new to me today, but I do echo some of the concerns of the prior folks that spoke. And my main one is really the affordability. I live in Bethesda, and if my house were torn down and you had a duplex, my house is probably worth about $800. The two townhouses on this property would probably be worth $800 each. So it wouldn't really make my house more affordable to my son who'd like to move closer. Most of the new houses, or even multi-houses that are being built in my neighborhood, there's an apartment for 2.3 million on Zillow right now and a townhouse for 1.4. So I guess my question is, it's not necessarily a bad idea. I'm just trying to figure out and understand if the council has addressed, if it's going to be market prices, how are you going to maintain affordability? And I'm sure the infrastructure, that's also a concern, but I'm sure that will be addressed at some point. But the question is how are you going to make that happen?
Great, thank you, Corinne. Up next, we have Jennifer Lavarelle. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, thank you. I first want to compliment Ms. Lindsay on her management of this session. You're doing a lovely job.
Thank you so much.
I've worked in affordable housing policy for 30 years. I'm opposed to the proposal as currently put forth because I believe it will result in the loss of relatively affordable single-family housing and a price increase for the housing that is put into place. The cost will be higher than the housing that's torn down. And I support commenters who have requested that attention be focused on providing affordable housing. I just have two comments and a question. So one comment is that I encourage either Director Sartori or Councilmember Friedson to make all households in neighborhoods currently zoned for single-family housing aware of this proposal. I received a lovely flyer when gas-powered leaf blowers were prohibited. I have not received any communication from the council about this proposal. I learned about it due to a neighbor. I also encourage the council to make available for public comment for at least 60 calendar days the text of any proposed zoning text amendment that would put this recommendation into effect. And lastly, I have a question, but it seems I'm out of time. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for your comments. Thank you. Up next, we have Joan Beerweiler. Hi, Joan.
Hello. I am a homeowner from Aspen Hill. Attainable housing, together with Thrive, has been a bait and switch. Attainable housing was to provide affordable housing. It did not. It provides expensive housing. Attainable housing was to provide housing opportunities for minorities. It does not. Rather than eliminating discrimination, this plan encourages exclusivity and gentrification. Attainable housing was to provide opportunities for home ownership. It does not. It will encourage speculators and private equity firms to buy properties and compete against home buyers. Attainable housing does not provide infrastructure to support the density. It will raise our property taxes to pay for the infrastructure. Attainable housing is truly a bait and switch. It is a fraud. I ask you to question who gains by this. It is not the present or future residents of Montgomery County.
Thank you, Joan. Up next, we have Tracy D'Angelo. Hi, Tracy.
Hi there, how are you? Thank you for this opportunity. I think in a lot of ways I am going to be echoing the sentiments of the last speaker. I feel like the whole name Attainable Housing is a sort of misleading misnomer. And this is the third session that I've either attended or listened to. I was at the one last week in Bethesda. I've listened to the recordings of some of the other ones. And most of the comments I hear in favor of this this scheme, I would call it, are people who believe that they are going to get affordable housing out of this. And that's not the case. In fact, the fact that 19 unit buildings are the largest buildings allowed in the growth corridors is sort of a cynical, bow to developers so that they don't have to develop any affordable units. And I think that's, really, really misleading the people that you think are in favor of this program. The infrastructure issues, whether it's roads, schools, green space, electrical, sewer, water, you name it, the fact that that has not addressed comprehensively in this is deeply disturbing, and to drop that wholesale on these communities, I think would be a disaster for our county. And as somebody who lives in a growth corridor on Connecticut Avenue in a historic house, I'm really confused about how you are going to deal with this in historic districts that are designated. We've bent over backwards to accommodate the county.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, but your time is up. But thank you so much for your comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Up next, we have Joshua Leifer. Hi, Joshua.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. It seems to me the whole process here is happening backwards. Many of the residents who will be affected are in neighborhoods overwhelmed with overcrowded schools, cut-through traffics on old narrow streets, nonstop delivery trucks, lack of parking, outdated infrastructure, and increased impervious surfaces. It seems like infrastructures like schools and roads should be built first, and then the appropriate density, which can be accommodated, introduced on a granular street-by-street basis rather than a one-size-fits-all approach. Already in the last few years, we have seen building up of Chevy Chase Lake, Bethesda, Westbard, and that is in the vicinity of some of these neighborhoods without increasing infrastructure. There are areas in the county which this may make much more sense and may actually lead to more attainable housing in some of the less dense areas up county, etc. Thank you for hosting this talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Joshua. Up next, we have RMCKAY, R. McKay, if I'm not mistaken. Good afternoon. I don't think we can hear you yet. We can't hear you yet. I'll give you a few seconds. Looks okay. What about now? No, but how about we circle back to you while we figure that out, and we'll come right back, okay? Up next, we have Kenny Hodge. Good afternoon, Kenny.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the time. Thank you for hosting this session. I want to echo concerns that have been expressed previously as somebody who recently bought a single-family home in Chevy Chase Section 3. I feel like this plan is very one-size-fits-all. I would challenge you to explain how one of the denser neighborhoods in Montgomery County, like Chevy Chase Section 3, fits with this kind of policy, with the narrow roads that we have, with schools within our little community, how we actually fit these things. I also want to answer the question, I think that I'm correct in saying that someone was asking, why aren't we doing more than 19 unit apartment buildings? And the answer to that, to me, plainly seems that 20 units and above, you're actually required to have moderately priced units within your building. These requirements for this plan actually circumvent that and are just under the cusp of ensuring that there would be actually attainable housing in any of these 19 unit apartment buildings, which we know will all end up actually looking like the dwellings on Wall Street and will not be attainable. Eliminating single family homes by building other types of units are only going to make those homes more expensive. And I urge the council to really look at the basic premises here of how they're looking to drive attainable housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny. R. McKay, we're going to circle back to you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, right microphone this time.
Thank you. Lifelong resident of Montgomery County, 64 years old, inherited my house because I can't afford it here from my parents. Seen this density thing play out. Chevy Chase Lake is an example where they let the builder build lots of expensive housing based on a project that's over budget and not on schedule. That would be the purple line, which will be so expensive, moderate income, low income people won't be able to ride it. Anyways, and they have traffic issues. House was built in 1908 and it has the same infrastructure supporting it. So when I sell and you put a quad in here, you're going to be hooking up to 80, 90-year-old infrastructure? I don't think so. You really need to address that. It's and the other thing is quadplex, duplex, in expensive neighborhoods, you get expensive small houses. It's going to be market value. It's not going to be affordable by any means. I think that's probably it. Thanks.
Thank you. Up next, we have Hanny or Hanai.
Oh, let me turn myself off here.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, hi. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for providing the opportunity to speak and express our comments and concerns. While I absolutely support the idea of affordable housing in our area, I'm strongly opposed to the implementation and approach that's being laid out. Detailed analysis is truly lacking in the final report, especially around the impact on infrastructure. Current infrastructure policies need to be addressed first. More importantly, improve the infrastructure that is existing today. Build new, smaller neighborhood schools. Solve the stormwater irrigation issues. Improve traffic flows in parking areas. Increase the safety of biking and pedestrian pathways. And at the same time, please have your teams and task forces come out to each community here in Montgomery County. Every community is different, as other concerned residents have expressed here. I live in the Ashburton neighborhood, which is in the Walter Johnson High School cluster with 3 young children in the public school system. The Ashburn area, similar to other Bethesda, North Bethesda towns, is experiencing a remarkable amount of infill right now. New structures, new developments everywhere that are falling squarely within the Ashburton boundary. Not only are we dealing with increased traffic congestion, but we're dealing with it all throughout our school neighborhoods. We're dealing with a lack of planning around building these new developments and their impacts on our schools. The planning board continues to greenlight new development without consideration to the schools and to our infrastructures. Ashburn is at near overutilization. Walter Johnson, where students are attending high school, it has the capacity of 3,000 students for a facility meant for 2,300 students. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Paul Allen. Good afternoon, Paul.
Okay. Hi, I hope I'm unmuted.
Yes, you're unmuted. We can hear you.
Well, I think a number of people have pointed out the very serious flaws in this proposal. Showing a picture of a tear down McMansion and saying, well, we'll just put 2 front doors on it. And it'll, of course, because those units will be smaller, they'll be more affordable. That's not how it's going to work at all. And I think we all know that. In high property value neighborhoods, those new units will be very expensive. I think all of the issues that have been raised around all the various types of infrastructure costs are completely legitimate. What this boils down to is a classic case of socializing the risk and privatizing the profits. And if this is just an up or down decision, then it has to be rejected and sent back to the drawing board, where affordability needs to be the guiding light for this next round, because this is not going to produce affordable housing. It just won't. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Up next, we have Drew Polikoff. Hi, Drew.
Hi, good afternoon. I grew up in Montgomery County, and my wife and I moved to Chevy Chase Section 5 a few years ago to start our family. We have a 1-year-old child. Like others, I support the purported policy rationale and goals of this proposal, which are admirable. However, the proposal is oversweeping without being properly vetted, without being supported by corresponding infrastructure investments in these areas, and without taking into account the specific and differentiated needs of particular communities, including, as previously mentioned, with regards to preservation of greenery, trees, parking, traffic, and other safety concerns, which are paramount in Section 5. My street is extremely narrow. People park on the street, and it's unrealistic to think that there won't be more cars with this proposal and housing. As others have mentioned, a paramount concern to me is that there's no limiting principle and no check on developers in this proposal. I'm deeply concerned this will ultimately not only lead to unintended consequences, but also be directly counterproductive to the purported goals with respect to affordable housing, including with respect to pricing increasing, given the developer concerns that were articulated just now by Paul and a few minutes ago by Kenny, which I agree with wholeheartedly and want to echo. Thank you for providing this opportunity.
Thank you, Drew. Up next, we have Brookville Knowles.
Hello, my name is Maria Bender. I'm with Brookville Knowles HOA, but I'm on the call as a resident. In general, I support the goals of this plan, and as others have said, but not the approach. I've lived in Montgomery County for 63 years and in my single family home for 37 years. I've raised my kids here, and my plan has always been to age in place, but now I feel like the county wants me out to make room for younger generations. The first comment I have is it was brought up at a previous session that there are several pieces of vacant land left undeveloped, including White Flint Mall, Lake Forest Mall, and the Vitro site that has been vacant for decades. It was stated developers cannot afford to build at this time. We had COVID, which drove up cost of building supplies, and then we had high inflation. So my question is around what concessions is the county making to entice developers to move forward on these projects, which would provide a lot of units. And the second comment I have is the River Road corridor is limited to south of the Beltway. Seems most of Potomac is exempt from these proposed changes. I'd like to understand why. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Ben Tregenberg. Hi, Ben. I think you're muted. No. Okay, while you figure that, just give us a second and we'll circle right back to you. Okay, Ben? While we figure that out. Okay, up next we have Liz Dalgard. Hi, Liz.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
As others have stated, I am also in opposition to the proposal. As of now, I agree with many of the sentiments expressed about just infrastructure, et cetera. My specific concern is with historic districts. As a resident of the Chevy Chase Village Historic District, I'm particularly concerned that this would undermine and significantly modify or replace many historic homes. Right now, the rule, the zoning would say that anyone can come in and convert a single family home by right. And most of the Chevy Chase Village Historic District would fall within the proximity housing district due to its proximity to the Friendship Heights Metro Station. So many historic homes could be demolished and replaced with quadplexes or other apartments. This development is not only unwanted by many in our neighborhood, it's within direct conflict with the stated goals of the county's Historic Preservation Commission and Chapter 24A of Montgomery County Code. At a minimum, the new zoning rules should make clear that these changes do not apply to historic properties or neighborhoods designated as historic districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Up next, we have Monica Reyes. Hi, Monica.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, we can hear you, Monica.
Oh, thank you so much. I live in Aspen Hill. Been living here for a long time. It's the only piece of land that I'm going to own in my life. And I'm opposing this attainable housing because it's not attainable. This is market value. They have telling to us minority that it's going to be affordable, and actually it's not affordable. This apartment building are going to start at $800,000. So it's not affordable for Latinos and Black. But as a result, it's going to be gentrification, and not only just gentrification, it's going to be displacement. We're going to be displaced, Latinos and Black. I mean, there is no other option for us. They're going to move us. They're planning to move us, I don't know where, to the hills in West Virginia, I guess. But we are not going to be able to be here or buy any property. So I oppose this program. This program is racist, didn't take in communication the minority communities, especially Latinos and Black. We don't have a voice here. So please, Please listen to us. We live too. We pay taxes. We are citizens. We are people. We deserve to be taken consideration by the county and the planning department. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. We're going to circle back to the gentleman who had his hand raised. I think it's under Zoom user, I see. Yes. Let's see if we can hear you now.
Me?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right. Yeah, thank you. It was appreciate all the points that have been brought up and appreciate your time. A lot of valuable input here. I don't envy the decision makers. My main concern as a father of 4 and 6-year-old are the overcrowding of the schools. It's a big issue. They all seem to be bursting at the seams right around here. We're in the North Bethesda area, but it seems to be kind of all over the place. Second is the infrastructure issue, drainage, stormwater runoff. Our house flooded about 3 years ago, a year into owning our home. It had never flooded in 50 plus years, and then it massively flooded out a bunch of houses. Now we may be turning into a flood zone, and most of this can be attributed to the development going on, hasty development nearby that has not addressed a lot of the runoff. So just need to make sure that the infrastructure is updated to handle this. And then what a lot of people have said, just concerned that property developers may be unintended winners of this whole thing and not the intended parties of the development. But do support the initiative overall for sure. Just needs to be done smart and with everything taken into account. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Up next, we have Nina Koltnow. Nina Koltnow. Hi, Nina.
Hi. Am I unmuted?
Yes,
okay.
I can hear you. Yes.
Thank you for this opportunity. I agree with those who expressed concerns about the infrastructure, potential loss of trees and greenery, and also about the profit-driven development strategies within residential neighborhoods. I think some minor changes could make a big difference. One would be to focus more of the building in the outlying areas of the county and not so close in. And one would be to change that 500-foot zone from the corridors to maybe just on the corridor and abutting properties, like one house off. 500 feet in does mean that you could change the nature of a lot of neighborhoods, but that won't happen if you keep it right onto the corridors. Let's see what else I have. And I'm talking about tri- and quadplexes. I think that if ADUs and duplexes were allowed for anybody who is a property owner, not a developer, that could also go a long way to solving the issues, particularly of people who want to age in place or add family members to their property. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Up next, we have Alexandra Franzway. Hi, Alexandra. I think you're muted.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I'm a homeowner in Silver Spring, and I'm supportive of portions of this plan, but have concerns and questions about several details or omissions. Notification to residents of these potential changes and community listening on specific components of this plan and how they would be addressed by the county has not been sufficient. Much of the discussion pits NIMBYism against access to housing, and we are missing more research and definition on the nuance of the plan's impact on infrastructure, actual affordability, and measures to protect against tree loss and account for environmental impact. A flag that the plan itself raises is missing. A quick personal note, I also had my first child less than a week ago and was released from the hospital less than 48 hours ago. Even though I'm not really in a position to prioritize this Zoom meeting, I felt I had no choice because of the importance of this discussion, and it was my only opportunity to listen, learn, and comment. Only one virtual option in the middle of a workday with restricted capacity and advanced registration required is not a picture of community engagement and listening, and the Council and Planning Board should do more to engage. I'd also just like to second the suggestions made earlier that the county should notify residents of this plan rather than require us to advocate within our neighborhoods or inform other people about this plan, and also allow a period for comment and potentially a vote. Thank you. My appreciation to everyone who's made the time to be here today on the council, the planning board, and of course, all the community members. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Up next, we have Ngun Par. and GUNPAR.
Hi. Hi.
Hello.
Oh,
We can
okay.
hear you.
Sorry.
Yes. Mhm.
Sorry, I'm not able to turn on my my camera as this is a work issued computer. So I work with the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, and I'm in the Housing and Logistics Department where we help house refugees and immigrants who have come to the US. And so I appreciate the work that's being done to address affordable housing in the Montgomery area. However, I am concerned about how we can effectively solve the issue for immigrants and refugees when even longtime residents and those who grew up here are struggling to afford housing, as what I've collected from this meeting. I just want to know what steps can be taken to ensure that the new arrivals or like particularly vulnerable populations such as like the refugees and I think what was her name? Monica had mentioned the African and his Black and Hispanic communities aren't left behind. Where a system where housing is already scarce and unaffordable for many locals. Like, how can we balance these needs and ensure that affordable housing options are available for everyone without further straining the existing housing market?
Thank you. Up next, we have GWC. Hello.
Oh, is that me?
Yep, that's you. It says GW.
Okay.
My phone.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we
Can you hear me?
you.
Okay, sorry. I'm against, so this is a good first start discussion. I'm against, I believe that housing means ownership. I have a home in Howard County. I have a townhome in Germantown. I have seen Howard Hughes in Howard County buy up everything, talk affordable housing. Nothing is affordable in Howard County. So I've seen what developers do in that neighborhood in downtown Columbia. And I think you should use that as an example to look at. But I grew up in the Midwest, and in the Midwest, they did development different than they do here. They put the residencies at the end of the county and developed toward the major areas. But here they do organic from the cities. And so I think they just need to look at how they're planning these communities, because if you've already got an expensive area, I don't know how you're going to get affordable housing if the property is so expensive. That's my comments. Oh, one more thing. The CDFIs was a government instrument created to help develop communities. Have you had any discussions with the local CDFIs to get their opinions on the housing situation? Because many of them have funds for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Liz B. Hi, Liz.
Hi. Thanks for letting me speak today. First, on this Eve of Rosh Hashanah, to our Jewish residents, Shana Tova. It's been a tough year. I pray for the safety, security, and support of your family, friends, and loved ones in Israel at this time of war in the year ahead. And as regards the topic at hand, I haven't heard anyone dispute that we have affordable housing crisis in MoCo. The problem is that the AHSI does not address affordability, and planning admits that AHSI is not an affordable housing plan. The problem is that, in fact, AHSI is counterproductive because AHSI actually incentivizes the destruction of the cheapest and thus most affordable housing in MoCo that we have already, and its replacement with multiplex housing that it will inevitably cost more than the housing it demolished. Frankly, it offends my and many others' intelligence. Upzoning is a new fad being tried across the county in less than 24 cities and counties. It's so new that there is no track record at all, and I cannot find any evidence of it producing affordable housing anywhere, and I've looked. I live in a small community called Village of Drummond. It's a tiny and strong 120-year-old community with 120-year-old infrastructure on a very narrow dead-end street. We are already being literally squeezed between a growing downtown Bethesda and DC. Our only egress is to Wisconsin Avenue and a tiny alley to Somerset. By planning's own analysis, a large proportion of our properties could be prime targets for developers, including some with perfectly nice smaller houses. Nobody believes AHSI would bring affordability to Drummond, and not a single resident in my community has told me they support AHSI. We simply could not handle it.
Thank you so much, Liz. Your time is up. Thank you for your comment. Okay, up next we have Irving Liberman.
Yes, hi. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. I'm sorry I can't get my camera and my microphone to work at once, and I thought the microphone might be more important. I appreciate the hearing, and I appreciate your soliciting public input and the remarks of people who've spoken before me. I wanted to comment a little more generally on the process, which is, as a resident of Bethesda near Westbard, it seems to me that there's a tendency of the county government now to be pursuing initiatives without being mindful of the community's preferences. It seems that people who consider themselves experts and specialists advising the council believe they know better than the people who live in these neighborhoods. Westbard was universally opposed, or almost universally opposed, by the residents. The plan was put through anyway. It was the density. It wasn't that it was being redeveloped. The Little Falls Parkway Road has been closed off and greatly restricted. The council has said they would open another one of the lanes, although on a traffic diet, it's a year later, they still haven't done that. And now this is an initiative that would severely impact the value of people's homes, people who are committed to mortgages, people who are embedded in the community, and that the planning board has come up with a plan. I'm glad to see Councilman Friedson, who is my councilman, has said that it won't be a fast track process, but I just think that there's been a tendency of the county government now to just sort of imposing its views and its expertise on the citizens and disregarding what the citizens want. And I urge that not be done in this process. This is too important.
Thank you, Irving. Thank you. Up next, we have Megan. Megan?
Oh, hi, everyone. Thank you for this session today. And I really am impressed by, my neighbors and their comments. I think everyone is very intelligent in our community and really cares about this issue. And like the new mom, we are all taking out time from our day to address this issue. And I am, concerned and want to make sure that the process is as transparent as possible. I want to commend everyone here to my comments that I've submitted on this issue that are more detailed, but it really strikes me that these are important listening sessions, because it seems that the council and the planning board are possibly out of touch with what is going on in our communities, and that more of this needs to happen so that resources are appropriately targeted to where they need to be in our community. So, to that end, I'd like to see, the data on the housing shortage and how this plan will alleviate that, and how rezoning will support attainable or affordable housing in our community, how the infrastructure will be supported. I live in Rollingwood. We live in a forest, how that will be cared for. And where we can find information on how much funds have been reallocated to this whole planning process, where the third-party payments have been made to do these plans, and how much time has been spent by the council on this instead of it spending its resources on other issues that are really critical to this county. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. That looks like all the time we have. I'm going to toss it back to Council President for closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate all of your efforts today. Jordan, you did a beautiful job managing and navigating through this with a lot of people. This is the largest call that I have ever been part of, and really appreciate all of your efforts. Thank you for all the comments and the feedback, and for being with us this afternoon. I also want to thank everyone for how civil and thoughtful you've been today on a topic that understandably evokes a lot of passion and a lot of emotion. I really do appreciate anybody who's willing to engage and to speak up and speak out and advocate for their families and their communities. So thank you. To clarify, since it's come up in several comments, this is not an all or nothing proposal. The council will not be voting on all of these recommendations in an up or down vote. There is no legislation that is currently before us. We have recommendations, and ultimately it will be up to the council. So that's why we're doing these listening sessions, and ultimately really do appreciate all the feedback, comments, questions, and concern. As I noted earlier, following the listening sessions we've hosted throughout the county in White Oak, Germantown, Wheaton, Silver Spring, Bethesda, Chevy Chase, and today's virtual session, Our staff will be working on aggregating all the questions, comments, and concerns we've heard from residents who have shared a wide variety of views and have raised a number of questions and concerns. Those will be shared with all council members, and with consideration to all the feedback and some of the answers to those questions, the council will process what we've learned from you as we've listened to you, and ultimately we're going to decide how to proceed. In order to move forward, zoning changes will need to be formally introduced at the council and will need to go through the formal legislative process, which has not even begun. I just want to thank again all of our hardworking staff who helped to put this together, our public information office, who have been incredible, the IT team, my office team, and the planning team who worked together along with the council staff, analysts, and attorneys. Really appreciate everybody for helping to pull this off. Thank you again to all of the residents and community members who showed up and who have spoken up and who have raised your questions, comments, concerns, both for, against, and somewhere in the middle. I just want to acknowledge, and as some have already, Shana Tova to those who are observing, like me, Rosh Hashanah beginning this evening. Wishing everybody a happy, sweet, and peaceful new year, whether you're observing or not. And just want to thank again everybody who's engaged in this. I want to note one more time that the portal is still up. You can still send in your written comments, feedback, questions, and comments. That will be part of what we take under consideration. So we are listening to you and hearing from you both in these sessions and also through what you submit and send to us. Sending it through the portal will make it easier for us to ensure that it is included and shared with all council members as opposed to individual emails. So if you could try to submit your feedback that way, it would help us to make sure that it is being taken under consideration in the most formal way possible, and that it is received by all council members and is also received by our staff so that any questions that are raised can be addressed. So thank you for that. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for being part of this process. Thank you for helping us to put together an unprecedented level of public outreach before any legislation is even introduced. It really has helped to have a civil conversation like we were able to today, to be able to understand some of the questions, the comments, and the concerns. And we look forward to continuing this conversation as we move forward, and really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you, and have a good afternoon, and be safe and be well.